The hood of the black Genesis G90 hangs open like a split jaw, heat still rising from the engine block, and Aisha Johnson's hand is already inside it when Park Do-yeon says her name. Not loudly, just enough. Across the polished concrete of Gangseo Precision Motors, Kim Sung-won stands with his cuffs buttoned, jacket uncreased, watching the only car in the bay that is not running. 10 minutes, Aisha says, without looking up. A wrench drops somewhere behind her. No one bends to pick it up. Park steps closer, tablet pressed flat against her chest. Step away. The digital service board above the tool cabinet flashes 1820 in red. Departure. The convoy outside idles in a tight line, engines humming through the open bay doors. The sound leaks in with the cold air from Gangseo. Kim's gaze shifts from the clock to Aisha's back. 10 minutes, she repeats, wiping her fingers once on a clean cloth before reaching deeper into the engine assembly. Senior engineers in Navy uniforms stand along the perimeter, oil stains on their sleeves, smudged diagnostics tablets in their hands. None of them meet her eyes. Park's voice sharpens. We've already run full diagnostics. The update from Olsen is sealed. You are not authorized to override. Aisha adjusts a sensor housing by less than a breath. The engine ticks differently. Not louder. Different. Silence lands. Even the convoy hum outside seems to thin. Kim checks his watch. The second hand moves. He does not. The Genesis does not start. Park takes one more step forward. If you interfere and damage the control module, the responsibility is yours. Entirely. Aisha slides her hand out, flexes her fingers once, then leans back in. It won't leave this building like this. No one answers her. A mechanic near the lifts exhales through his teeth. Another glances at Kim, waiting for instruction that does not come. The service board blinks again, the red digits refusing to soften. Kim finally speaks. How long? His voice is quiet. It carries anyway. Aisha keeps her eyes on the engine. 10 minutes. A beat. Park turns to Kim. Sir, the investors are already at Signal Seoul. If the vehicle is delayed. Kim raises 2 fingers. Park stops. The bay feels smaller now. Concrete walls. Steel beams. Fluorescent light reflecting off polished black paint. The Genesis sits at the center of it all, silent, expensive, immovable. Aisha twists a connector. The vibration under her palm shifts, then settles into an uneven rhythm. She stills, listening with her hand pressed flat against the casing. Behind her, someone mutters that this is not the time. The words do not travel far. The clock changes to 18:15. 5 minutes gone. Park lowers her voice. You will be reported. Aisha does not look at her. She reaches for a narrow tool from the tray without breaking focus. Not if it starts. Kim steps closer to the front of the car. Close enough that the heat from the engine touches his wrist. He studies Aisha's posture, the way she doesn't rush, doesn't flinch at the eyes on her back. The convoy outside revs once. Impatient, Aisha pulls back a wiring sheath and exposes a cluster of pins no one else has touched. She hesitates for half a second. Then she presses. The engine coughs. Once. Twice. The mechanics straighten. The Genesis does not catch. The digital clock continues its descent. Park turns fully toward Kim now. Sir, we need to move you to the secondary vehicle. Kim does not answer her. His eyes remain on Aisha. She closes her hand around the tool and looks over her shoulder for the first time. Not at Park. At him. 10 minutes, she says again, steadier this time. The air holds. If he pulls her away now, the car leaves on a flatbed. The meeting at Signal Seoul fractures before it begins. Every rival watching the clock will notice. If he lets her continue, and she fails, the damage will not be mechanical. The red digits above them flip to 18:14. Kim slips his watch off his wrist and places it on the edge of the engine bay, face up, where Aisha can see the seconds moving. You have 10, he says. Park inhales sharply. Around them, the hierarchy tilts, just enough to feel it. Aisha turns back to the exposed pins, the watch ticking beside her hand, the convoy idling beyond the doors, and for the first time the risk in the room is not the engine. It is the choice he just made. The second hand on Kim Sung-won's watch scrapes forward in tiny silver jumps beside Aisha's wrist. She doesn't look at it again. She adjusts the exposed connector with a steadier grip now, thumb braced against hot metal, feeling for resistance that shouldn't be there. The engine's uneven pulse travels through her palm into her shoulder. Behind her, Park Do-yeon steps closer to the front fender. "Sir, this is a violation of manufacturer protocol," Park says, each word trimmed sharp. "If she alters the firmware seal from Ulsan without authorization, liability transfers to this facility entirely." Aisha keeps her focus inside the engine bay, but Park's shadow falls across the wiring harness she's touching. Liability. The word hangs in the fluorescent air like something already signed. Outside, the convoy engines rev again, longer this time. A driver leans out of a sedan, checks his phone, glances toward the bay. The sound presses inward, impatient, territorial. The red digits above the tool cabinet blink to 1812. Kim does not move his watch. One of the senior engineers clears his throat. "We ran 3 scans," he says, not to Aisha. To the room. All parameters within tolerance. It's a timing irregularity from the last update. It will stabilize once in motion. Aisha slides her fingers beneath the wiring sheath again and presses against the same cluster of pins. The engine stutters harder. Several heads snap toward her. She closes her eyes for half a breath, listening through her hand. The vibration carries a thin metallic tremor underneath it now. Not surface noise. Deeper. Park shifts her weight. "You're worsening it." Aisha pulls back, studies the diagnostic tablet docked near the battery housing. Lines of data flicker, green, then amber, then green again. Too clean. Too synchronized. She taps the screen once. The feed freezes for a fraction of a second before correcting itself. Her jaw tightens. Kim notices. "What?" he says. She hesitates. The engineers along the wall exchange quick glances. One adjusts his uniform collar as if the temperature has changed. Park answers for her. "There is nothing. The system is sealed." Aisha lifts her gaze to Kim, just briefly. The data's smoothing spikes that are still there. Silence. The convoy outside idles again, shorter this time. A horn taps once and cuts off. Park's tablet lights up with a notification. She turns it so Kim can see. A message banner. "Investors confirmed arrival at Signal Seoul. Waiting." "Sir," Park says quietly now. "If this vehicle fails to arrive, it will not be interpreted as a mechanical delay." The meaning settles heavy. Aisha looks back at the diagnostic feed. The amber flicker returns for a heartbeat and disappears again, swallowed by the green overlay. Someone near the lifts mutters, "This is unnecessary." Another adds, "We all signed off." The words land like a wall forming behind her. The clock flips to 1810. 10 minutes are half gone. Park steps directly beside Aisha now. Close enough that their shoulders almost touch. "Stop," she says under her breath. "You are not certified to break the seal." Aisha's gloved fingers hover over the small metal tab that locks the firmware casing. A thin strip stamped with a serial code from Ulsan. If she lifts it, there is no quiet way back. Kim's watch ticks beside her knuckles. The bay grows still. Even the convoy engines outside seem to wait. Aisha presses her thumb against the edge of the seal. Park's voice sharpens. "If you do that, you void every protection this facility has. You will be terminated before the car leaves Gangseo." The senior engineers say nothing now. No one steps forward. The engine's vibration shifts again beneath Aisha's other hand. Subtle, but wrong in a new way. The tremor deepens, like a misfire waiting for motion to expose it. Her breath slows. Kim watches her, not Park. The red digits blink to 1809. Aisha hooks the tip of her tool under the seal. For a second, no one speaks. Then the engine shudders, harder than before, and the idle drops dangerously low, almost collapsing into silence. The idle collapses to a ragged shiver, the Genesis G90 trembling under Aisha's hands as if the engine is trying to swallow its own breath. Someone swears under his breath. Park Do-yeon steps back instinctively, heels scraping concrete. "You see," she snaps. "You destabilized it." Aisha doesn't answer. She keeps her palm pressed to the casing, feeling past the violent shake to the pattern beneath it. The tremor isn't random. It's pulsing, regular, controlled, almost corrected before it becomes visible. The red digits blink to 1808. Kim Sung-won doesn't look at the clock. He looks at the engine, then at Aisha. "Explain," he says. Aisha reaches for the diagnostic tablet again. The green overlay flickers, smooths, flickers. She scrolls back 3 seconds. The spike appears, sharp, undeniable, then vanishes under a correction curve that shouldn't exist. They're damping it, she says quietly. Park's jaw tightens. The update from Olsen stabilizes ignition variance. That is standard. Aisha zooms further in. The correction line doesn't originate from ignition timing. It branches from a separate control path, one that feeds through the vehicle's external communications module. Her fingers still. The convoy outside revs again, longer this time. A driver checks his watch. Another leans against a hood, scanning the street beyond Gangseo Precision Motors. The clock drops to 1807. Aisha taps the serial stamp on the firmware seal with the edge of her tool. This isn't just ignition smoothing. Park folds her arms. You are speculating. Aisha shakes her head once. It's rerouting error reporting. The words land heavier than the shuddering engine. One of the senior engineers steps forward despite himself. That's impossible. Manufacturer firmware doesn't mask internal diagnostics. Aisha angles the tablet so he can see. The amber spike flashes again for half a second before being overwritten by green. He stops speaking. Kim shifts his weight slightly, shoes whispering against concrete. Masking for what? Aisha's eyes move across the code stream. The reroute path leads outward, not inward. It syncs with the telematics channel, the same channel that transmits live vehicle data to external stakeholders. Her throat tightens. If the engine stalls publicly, the transmitted feed will show clean metrics until the moment of failure. Clean metrics. Sudden collapse. She looks up at Kim. Who receives live telemetry from this vehicle? She asks. Park answers too quickly. Standard manufacturer oversight. Kim doesn't look at Park. The convoy engines outside fall quiet for a second, as if listening. The red digits blink to 1806. Aisha scrolls further. The firmware build date appears on the lower corner of the screen. 3 days ago. Tagged to a batch code linked to Olsen. 3 days. Kim's meeting at Signal Seoul is tonight. With import partners tied directly to that manufacturing line. Her fingers hover above the exposed seal. If she breaks it and exposes this reroute, the data trail points straight back to Olsen's update. Not a glitch. Not randomware. Something written in. Park steps closer again, voice lowered but harder. Close it. Now. You've made your point. Aisha doesn't move. The engine shudders once more, deeper this time. The vibration rattling a loose wrench on the tray. The sound skitters across the bay floor. 1805. Half the granted time gone. Kim's associate appears at the entrance to the bay, phone pressed to his ear, eyes fixed on the car. He lowers the phone slowly, gaze shifting from the engine to Aisha's hand on the seal. Aisha feels the weight of every uniform in the room settle behind her. If she reseals it and lets the car leave, the data feed stays clean. The meeting proceeds. Whatever is buried in that firmware remains buried. If she lifts it, the rupture won't stay inside Gangseo. Her thumb presses harder against the edge of the metal strip. The engine vibration evens for a moment, too even, as if someone, somewhere, just tightened the mask. Aisha's stomach drops. This correction isn't reacting to her touch. It's responding to something else. It's responding to something else. The vibration smooths again under Aisha's palm, not because she adjusted it, but because it corrected itself. Her hand freezes against the hot casing. A faint, high-pitched whine threads through the engine note, almost buried beneath the idle. It isn't mechanical. It's electronic. A frequency she's heard before. The sound pulls at something deeper than the present moment. Fluorescent lights hum overhead in Gangseo Precision Motors. The same hum. The same brittle echo against concrete. Her fingers tighten unconsciously, grease pressing into the lines of her skin. Busan. A smaller lab. Narrower base. A test engine mounted on a stand, vibrating in a way no one else seemed to hear. She had pointed at the waveform on the screen. A deviation. A soft reroute in the signal path. It stabilizes itself, an instructor had said without looking up. You're overreading it. The engine had failed 2 days later during a demonstration. She blinks. The memory collapses back into the present. The Genesis shivers again, then smooths, as if corrected by an unseen hand. The red digits burn above the cabinet. 1803. 3 minutes. Park Do-yeon's voice cuts through the air. Enough. Seal it. Aisha doesn't move. The senior engineers stand with their arms folded now, faces hard. One of them, Min-jae, shifts his weight and avoids looking at the diagnostic screen she turned toward him earlier. His signature sits on the service approval. Their approval. Her fingers brush the metal strip again. The seal is thin. It would snap cleanly if she lifts it. The high-pitched whine returns, faint but precise. It syncs with the flicker on the tablet display. Correction. Mask. Correction. She hears another voice layered over it. Busan again. That same lab. That same dismissal. A room where her adjustments were adopted quietly later, without her name attached to them. Where the solution appeared on the board as if it had always been obvious. Her jaw tightens. Behind her, Kim Sung-hwan stands close enough now that she can feel his presence without turning. The scent of expensive cologne cuts through the oil and heated metal. Still, controlled. Park steps in front of the engine bay, forcing Aisha to look up. You've made your observation. That is all. The convoy outside grows restless again. A door slams. Tires shift against pavement. Someone checks the time loudly enough for it to carry inside. 18:02. 2 minutes. The number lands like a physical weight. Aisha glances at the watch Kim placed beside her hand. The second hand sweeps with indifferent precision. If she reseals it now, no one questions the signatures already attached to this car. The meeting at Signal Seoul proceeds. The firmware remains untouched. The spike remains buried under green. Her silence would not be new. The engine's vibration dips suddenly, lower than before, then steadies. Too steady. The correction curve on the screen flattens in perfect symmetry. Perfect. Her throat dries. Park's tone hardens. Step back, Aisha. The use of her name this time isn't restrained. It's a command. The senior engineers shift closer. Not touching her. Just closing the space around the bay. The red digits blink again, unblinking and cruel. 18:01. Aisha's thumb hooks under the edge of the seal once more. The whine in the engine rises half a note, sharp enough now that she knows she isn't imagining it. She looks at the tablet one last time. The correction line isn't just smoothing spikes. It's waiting. The correction line on the tablet holds perfectly flat, as if anticipating impact. Aisha's thumb remains hooked under the firmware seal. The metal edge bites into the pad of her finger. The engine hums in that same false steadiness, the high electronic whine threading beneath it like a held breath. 18:01 becomes 1800 hours. The red digits change without mercy. Park Do-yeon steps closer, close enough that her sleeve brushes Aisha's arm. Seal it, she says again, lower now, tighter. You've pushed this far enough. Aisha doesn't look at her. The engine's vibration is wrong in a way she has felt before, when numbers behave too cleanly, when systems smooth themselves for an audience. Her mind flashes, not to Busan this time, but to a smaller desk in the back office of Gangseo Precision Motors 3 years ago. A stack of internal audit sheets. A line of irregular calibration reports flagged in faint amber. She had circled them in pen. She had waited for Park to sign off. Park had skimmed them, then set them aside. We correct internally, she'd said then. No need to escalate. Aisha had watched the papers disappear into a drawer. If she had filed them formally, the audit would have traveled upward. Questions would have followed. Contracts might have paused. The shop might have lost more than reputation. She had stayed silent. The engine shivers once, then returns to that controlled idle. 1800 hours flips to 1759 on Kim Sung-hwan's watch. 1 minute of the promised 10 remains. The convoy outside shifts again. A door closes harder than before. The street beyond Gangseo feels narrower now, as if Seoul itself is waiting to see which way this car rolls. Aisha lifts the tablet closer to her face. The reroute path pulses faintly in the lower right quadrant of the code stream. It's not random. It branches from a specific calibration table, one she recognized months ago when reviewing manufacturer patch notes late at night, long after the others had left. She had seen the vulnerability then, a pathway that could dampen fault spikes before transmission. She had drafted a memo. It sits unsent in her archived drafts. Her silence had kept the shop steady, kept Park's signatures clean, kept the contracts intact. The high-pitched whine sharpens for half a second, then settles. Park's voice tightens further. Aisha, step back. Now. The senior engineers close in another inch. Their bodies form a boundary around the open hood. Kim says nothing. Aisha studies the calibration table again. The reroute channel links to a secondary override, buried deeper, protected by access credentials above her clearance. If she forces the firmware seal and enters manual override, she can bypass the smoothing layer and expose the raw ignition feed. But that action logs her ID permanently into the system history. There will be no quiet correction after that. The engine vibrates under her palm, steady and deceptive. Her throat works once. "I've seen this path before," she says, barely above the engine noise. Park's eyes narrow. That is irrelevant. Aisha scrolls down to the deeper calibration tier. The override field is grayed out, locked behind authorization. She knows the location of the backdoor entry. Not from privilege. From nights spent reading patch structures line by line, memorizing architecture that wasn't assigned to her. The convoy engines outside start again, a low collective growl pressing against the open bay. 1758. Seoul does not wait. If she reseals it, this moment disappears into paperwork. The Genesis leaves for Signal Seoul. Whatever sits inside that firmware remains undisturbed. If she breaks it and bypasses authorization, her name attaches to the breach. Not speculation. Not suggestion. Breach. The earlier audit sheets flicker in her memory, papers she chose not to file. That choice cannot be undone. Her thumb shifts slightly, increasing pressure on the thin metal strip. The seal creaks faintly. Park inhales sharply. Aisha's other hand moves to the tablet, hovering over the hidden override access point. She knows exactly where to press. And she knows it will not ask her twice. She knows it will not ask her twice. Aisha's thumb presses harder against the firmware seal. "Don't," Park Do-yeon says, and this time the word isn't clipped, it cracks. The thin metal strip bends slightly under pressure. Kim Sung-hwan's associate steps fully into the bay, phone lowered but still lit in his hand. "They're seated," he says to Kim. Incheon representatives arrived early. They're asking why the convoy hasn't moved. The convoy engines outside growl in uneven bursts, drivers shifting gears, restless. 1757. Aisha doesn't look at anyone. Her other hand hovers over the hidden override field on the tablet. One touch, and the system logs her credentials. One touch, and the smoothing layer peels back. Park moves between her and the engine bay, blocking part of the view. "If you breach manufacturer firmware from Ulsan without authorization, I file an immediate report." Not internal. Her voice drops. Direct to compliance. The word compliance lands like a blade laid flat. The senior engineers do not speak. Their silence is heavier than protest. Kim's associate steps closer to him, lowering his voice, but not enough. "If we delay, Hanseong Motors will hear about it before dessert is served. They're waiting for a misstep." The name hangs in the air. Rival. Kim's jaw tightens once. A muscle flickers near his temple. The Genesis idles with that same deceptive calm. The high-pitched whine threads beneath it, steady and thin. Aisha presses lightly against the tablet screen. The override field pulses faintly, asking for credentials above her clearance. She knows the bypass path. She memorized it. Park reaches toward her wrist. Not touching yet. Close. "You are jeopardizing this entire facility," Park says, voice low and furious. "One technician against signed diagnostics from Ulsan. Against our approval." Aisha finally looks up at her. The fluorescent lights catch the grease on her cheek, the sweat at her hairline. "It won't hold under load," she says. Park's hand drops. "That is not your determination to make." Kim steps closer to the front of the Genesis, close enough that his reflection shimmers in the polished hood. "What happens under load?" he asks. The question is directed at Aisha. The room stills. The convoy engines outside cut for a moment, as if the drivers are waiting for a signal. Aisha's palm remains pressed to the engine casing. She can feel the artificial smoothing, the suppression of misfire spikes that should be visible. "It leaves here," she says carefully, runs clean on telemetry. Clean enough to satisfy everyone watching. Her eyes flick briefly to the associate's phone. Then the ignition variance compounds. "Not here. On the road." Park shakes her head sharply. Speculation. Aisha doesn't raise her voice. At speed, under acceleration, the masking layer can't damp it fast enough. The spike will surface all at once. Kim's associate glances at the open bay doors, toward the street beyond Gangseo, toward the route that leads eventually to Signal Seoul. And then, Kim says. Aisha swallows once. Then it doesn't correct. The silence after that feels physical. 1755. 2 minutes lost in argument. Park's composure fractures at the edges. You are not projecting failure onto this vehicle in front of its owner. Not without proof. Aisha turns the tablet toward Kim, pointing at the reroute channel branching from the calibration table. That path doesn't exist in standard builds. It's dampening outbound diagnostics. Kim studies the screen. His expression doesn't change. If we leave now, Aisha says, the words steady. The first visible failure won't be inside this bay. The associate's phone vibrates again. He doesn't answer it. Outside, a horn blares once, sharper than before. Park steps forward again, voice rising. Enough. Seal it or step away. Aisha's thumb presses harder against the metal strip. It creaks. She looks at Kim, not blinking. If this car leaves Gangseo like this, she says, it won't stall quietly. The engine hums beneath her palm, smooth and false. And when it fails, she adds, it won't fail here. It won't fail here. The words stay suspended between the hood and the fluorescent lights. No one moves. The Genesis hums, smooth as polished glass. Outside, a motorcycle revs past Gangseo Precision Motors, the sound slicing through the open bay before fading toward the Han River. Kim Sung-hwan's gaze remains on Aisha. Park Do-yeon steps in front of the engine again, shoulders squared. You are projecting catastrophe without measurable proof, she says, each syllable clipped. Diagnostics from Olsen cleared this update. Aisha turns the tablet so both of them can see the calibration tree. Her finger traces the reroute channel branching from the ignition table. It's not catastrophe, she says. It's timing. The associate shifts his weight, phone still in hand. Investors in Incheon are already asking why we're not moving, he mutters to Kim. Hanseong Motors won't hesitate to fill silence. Kim does not look at him. Aisha zooms into the masked variance curve. The line is too clean, too obedient. This smoothing layer suppresses spike visibility at idle and low torque, she says. It keeps outbound telemetry calm. Park folds her arms tightly across her chest. And Aisha swipes to the load simulation she forced into preview. The projected curve flickers, then fractures sharply past a certain RPM threshold. At highway acceleration, she says, tapping the screen, the masking layer saturates. It can't damp the ignition variance fast enough. The spike consolidates. The engine beneath her palm vibrates, steady, contained. She presses harder, feeling the artificial restraint in the rhythm. It won't misfire gradually, she continues. It will hold. Then it will cut. The word cut lands heavy. The associate's jaw tightens. On which road? Aisha doesn't blink. Any road where cameras are waiting. Silence. A delivery truck rattles past outside. Somewhere deeper in the shop, a tool drops and echoes against concrete. Park's lips press into a thin line. You are assuming exposure. Aisha turns her head slowly toward Kim. If this vehicle stalls in front of Signal Seoul with Incheon investors present, telemetry logs will show the update came from Olsen. And that Gangseo cleared it. The fluorescent lights hum above them. Kim's reflection in the hood remains still, but his fingers curl slightly at his sides. The stall won't look mechanical, Aisha adds. It will look like oversight. Park takes a sharp step forward. Enough. Her heel strikes the concrete with a hard snap. You are exceeding your role, she says. This conversation ends now. Seal the firmware. Aisha lowers the tablet halfway. If I reseal it, she says quietly, you get clean departure. Clean arrival. She lets the word settle. Then the failure becomes public. The associate inhales through his teeth. If we delay, Hanseong gains leverage. If we move and stall, we lose credibility. Kim finally shifts his gaze to Park. She meets it without flinching. The air in the bay feels thicker now, carrying the scent of hot oil and coolant. Aisha steps back half a pace from the hood, not retreating, just enough space to be seen clearly. There is no quiet version of this, she says. The engine continues its polished idle. Kim walks slowly along the front of the Genesis, stopping near the driver's side headlight. He runs a finger along the chrome trim, leaving a faint streak through the dust. His associate's phone vibrates again. He silences it without answering. 17:52. For minutes bled out. Aisha lifts the tablet once more. If we clear the masking layer and recalibrate now, it holds under load. But it logs a firmware breach from this facility. She meets Kim's eyes directly. You choose where the damage lands. Park's breath is audible now, sharp and shallow. The senior engineers avoid eye contact entirely. Another silence falls, longer this time. Outside, one of the convoy drivers kills his engine. The sudden absence of sound feels louder than the noise. Kim looks at the open bay doors, then back at the Genesis. Then at Aisha. His jaw tightens once. He lifts his hand slightly toward the security guards near the entrance. For a fraction of a second, no one breathes. Stand down, he says evenly. The guards hesitate. Kim's gaze doesn't waver. And clear space, he adds. Park's face drains of color as the security team steps back from the hood. The circle around the Genesis opens. The engine continues to hum, waiting. The circle around the Genesis opens. Aisha steps into it. The security guards shift back toward the tool cabinets, boots scraping across concrete. Park Do-yeon doesn't move. She stands rigid near the fender, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles pale beneath the fluorescent glare. Kim Sung-hwan watches without blinking. Proceed, he says. The word lands like a signature. Aisha slides her thumb under the firmware seal and pulls. The thin strip snaps with a metallic crack that echoes through Gangseo precision motors. The sound is small, too small for what it costs. Park inhales sharply. On the tablet, the override field brightens. Authorization required. Aisha enters the hidden command string she memorized months ago. Not from clearance. From study. Long nights under dim light. The glow of schematics reflecting in the office window while Seoul slept beyond the glass. Her ID populates automatically. A warning window blooms across the screen. Unauthorized calibration access. Log entry permanent. She doesn't hesitate. Confirm. The engine note shifts instantly, barely perceptible, but different. The artificial smoothing layer dissolves. Raw ignition data floods the screen in jagged spikes, no longer obedient, no longer polite. A collective breath moves through the bay. Park steps forward. You understand this voids. Yes, Aisha says. She scrolls quickly through the ignition variance map, isolating the saturation point. The spikes cluster around a specific RPM band, exactly where highway acceleration peaks before merging toward Jamsil. The associate checks his watch. Departure time. Outside, the convoy engines ignite in unison. A low, synchronized growl vibrates through the open doors. 0. Aisha's fingers move fast now, selecting manual recalibration. She adjusts the fuel-air ratio curve, widens the tolerance band the Ulsan update narrowed, then rewrites the damping threshold so suppression doesn't accumulate pressure silently. The engine stumbles. A rough shudder runs through the chassis, sharp enough to rattle a loose wrench on the nearby cart. The smell of hot fuel thickens in the air. Park's voice cuts in tight. You destabilized it. Aisha keeps her eyes on the data stream. The spikes flare higher, ugly, exposed. Then she applies the new calibration. For half a second, nothing happens. Silence stretches. Even the convoy outside seems to pause. Then the Genesis roars. Not the muted, curated idle from before. A deeper, cleaner combustion. The vibration under Aisha's palm evens out. Not flattened, not suppressed, balanced. The jagged spikes on the tablet settle into controlled arcs that hold steady even as she increases the simulated load. Kim steps closer, close enough that the reflection of the recalibration screen flickers across his suit sleeve. Test it, he says. Aisha nods once. She signals to one of the junior engineers, who slides into the driver's seat. The door shuts with a solid thud. The engine revs. 3,000 RPM. 4. 5. The sound fills the bay, reverberating off concrete and steel. The recalibrated ignition curve holds firm. No sudden drop. No violent spike. The associate exhales audibly. Park says nothing now. Aisha lowers the RPM gradually, watching the data like a pulse under glass. Stable. Kim studies her face, not the screen. If this fails on the road, Park says quietly, almost to herself, Gangseo will not survive the report. Aisha doesn't respond. She already sees it, the log entry stamped with her credentials, the unauthorized breach recorded permanently in the system history. No internal memo will erase that. No quiet filing cabinet drawer. If this engine stalls in public now, it carries her name with it. The driver eases off the accelerator. The Genesis settles into a steady idle, clean, resonant. Outside, the The convoy engines rev impatiently. Kim glances toward the open street, then back at Aisha. "Close it," he says. The hood lowers with a heavy metallic thump. The Genesis rolls forward slowly, tires crunching over fine gravel near the bay entrance. The convoy aligns behind it, black sedans sliding into formation under the gray Seoul sky. Aisha stands still, tablet in hand, watching the diagnostic stream remotely as the vehicle clears the curb and turns toward the main road. Speed increases. 40 kilometers per hour. 60. The ignition curve remains stable. A faint murmur moves through the shop. Shoulders loosen. Someone exhales a nervous laugh that dies quickly. On the tablet, a small icon flickers in the lower right corner. Yellow. Aisha frowns slightly and taps it open. A secondary alert expands across the screen, hidden deeper in the system architecture, previously masked by the smoothing layer she removed. Battery management subsystem. Remote sync error. External signal detected. The Genesis accelerates toward the highway. The alert blinks again. And this time, it doesn't disappear. The alert blinks again. Yellow. Steady. Insistent. Aisha's thumb hovers over the screen as the Genesis merges onto the main road beyond Gangseo Precision Motors. On the live feed, speed climbs, 80 kilometers per hour. The recalibrated ignition curve holds clean. The secondary alert does not clear. Battery management subsystem. Remote sync error. External signal detected. The convoy follows in tight formation, black sedans gliding behind Kim Songhwan's car like shadows stitched to metal. Inside the bay, the tension loosens by degrees. One of the junior engineers exhales loudly and leans against the tool chest. Another wipes his palms on a rag, leaving dark streaks across already stained fabric. Park Do-yeon does not move. Engine stability? Kim's associate asks, stepping closer to Aisha. She tilts the tablet slightly, so he can see. Combustion curve is stable under load. The Genesis accelerates again, a smooth surge reflected in the live telemetry. No stall. No spike. The associate nods once, sharp and relieved, and steps aside to make a call. His voice drops to a murmur as he relays the update toward Incheon. Aisha taps into the battery subsystem alert. The data feed expands, pack voltage steady, thermal readings normal. But beneath it, a thin line of code scrolls in repeating intervals. A handshake request. Not internal. External ping origin. Encrypted. She glances up. Kim is still here. He has not left with the car. Instead, he stands near the open bay doors, watching the Genesis disappear into traffic, hands clasped loosely behind his back. The engine note fades into the wider hum of Seoul. The tablet vibrates softly in her palm as the alert refreshes. Park steps closer now, eyes narrowed at the screen. What is that? Aisha doesn't answer immediately. She isolates the signal trace. It routes through the same firmware architecture as the Ulsan update, but the signature is different. Not manufacturer standard. It's not mechanical, she says. Park's jaw tightens. Explain. Aisha scrolls upward, cross-referencing the patch metadata that arrived weeks ago from Ulsan. The authorization header lists approval credentials. Executive tier. Her finger pauses over one specific request ID embedded in the update chain. Park sees it too. For a moment, neither speaks. The fluorescent lights hum overhead. Outside, traffic flows as if nothing inside this bay has shifted. Park's shoulders lower by a fraction, not in relief. In calculation. That update, she says quietly, came with executive endorsement. Aisha nods once. Not from a mid-level engineer in Ulsan. Not from routine optimization. From above. The associate ends his call and approaches Kim. They're ready at Signal Seoul, he says. Private room secured. Kim's gaze moves from the empty street back to Aisha. And the vehicle, he asks. Stable, she replies. The word feels thinner than it should. The battery alert pulses again. External signal handshake persists. Park's eyes flick toward Kim, then back to the tablet. Something shifts in her expression, recognition tightening into something sharper. If that handshake is active, Park says under her breath, then someone retains remote visibility. Not just visibility. Control. Aisha traces the signal's origin route. It tunnels through a secured relay, one that would not be accessible without deliberate configuration during the firmware update process. Her earlier silence about the vulnerability presses against her now. Months of knowing the architecture could allow external interference. Months of saying nothing to keep the shop intact. That silence cannot be retrieved. Kim steps fully back into the bay, polished shoes echoing faintly on concrete. You corrected the engine, he says to Aisha. Yes. And this? She angles the tablet so he can see the alert. The yellow icon reflects faintly in his eyes. It's a remote sync request embedded in the recent firmware, she says. It's still active. Kim studies the scrolling code without outward reaction. Park folds her arms again, but her posture has changed. Less command. More guarded. If someone at executive level requested that patch, Kim says slowly, then someone at executive level can see this vehicle now. Aisha does not answer. The Genesis icon on the live map approaches the Han River Bridge, moving cleanly, confidently, toward Jamsil. Relief moves through the shop in small, careless gestures. Laughter at a private joke, a wrench set down too loudly. The battery alert flashes once more. Persistent. Kim looks at Aisha for a long moment. Bring your tablet, he says. The associate straightens. Kim's gaze does not leave her. You're coming to Signal Seoul. The words settle between them without force. Aisha's fingers tighten slightly around the tablet. The yellow alert continues its quiet pulse against her palm. Outside, Seoul traffic moves in patient lines, indifferent. Kim turns toward the waiting sedan at the curb. The remaining security detail falls into step behind him, measured and silent. Park Do-yeon lingers near the tool cabinets, arms folded, eyes lowered, not in defeat. In recalculation, Aisha walks past the open bay doors of Gangseo Precision Motors without looking back. The city air feels different from inside the shop, cooler, touched by the river. The convoy reforms around them as they enter the second vehicle. Leather seats. Filtered silence. The faint scent of cologne and new upholstery. No one speaks during the drive. On the tablet, the Genesis icon reaches the underground entry ramp of Signal Seoul. The battery alert remains steady. Persistent. Watching. They descend into the hotel's private parking deck. Concrete pillars rise in clean rows. The lighting is softer here, deliberate, expensive. The Genesis idles in a reserved space. Engine still smooth under the recalibrated curve. Aisha steps out beside Kim. The sound of the engine is controlled now. No artificial suppression, no jagged spikes. Balanced. Kim gestures subtly toward the car. Open it. She moves to the driver's side and connects the tablet directly to the port beneath the dash. The system syncs. The yellow alert expands again across the screen. Park's voice is absent here. Only the low hum of ventilation fans overhead. Kim stands beside her, hands behind his back, gaze on the dashboard display. You removed the mask, he says. Yes. And revealed this. The external handshake request scrolls again in encrypted intervals. Aisha isolates the signal path. It tunnels upward, past standard manufacturer layers, past mid-level authentication. Executive tier authorization required to embed it. It wasn't random, she says. Kim nods once. I know. The parking deck feels colder suddenly. He studies the reflection of the alert in the windshield. The update from Olsen did not originate solely from engineers. Aisha disconnects the tablet cable slowly. The click echoes in the confined space. Someone wanted remote visibility, she says. Control. Kim corrects softly. Silence stretches between them. Footsteps echo faintly from a distant elevator bank. In the polished black surface of the Genesis, Aisha sees herself reflected, grease faintly marking her cheek, sleeves rolled, hands still carrying the scent of fuel and metal. Inside Gangseo, she stood at the edge of the circle. Here, in this concrete hush beneath Signal Seoul, there is no circle, only proximity. Kim turns to face her fully now. You stepped outside protocol, he says. Yes. You placed your name into the log. She doesn't answer. He watches her for a long moment, as if measuring something invisible. Gangseo Precision Motors will not file against you, he says finally. Effective immediately, you will oversee independent diagnostics for my fleet. The ventilation system hums overhead. Not a promotion, not a favor, a shift. Aisha's grip tightens on the tablet. That division answers only to me. Kim continues. No manufacturer interference. No masked patches. Her reflection in the car door wavers slightly as a vehicle passes deeper in the deck. Months ago, she sat alone in a dim office with unfiled audit sheets stacked in a drawer. Silence protected the shop then. Silence kept her small. Here, silence would mean something else. She looks at the Genesis. Engine quiet, data stable, hidden handshakes still blinking beneath the surface. If I take that authority, she says carefully, I audit everything. Including Ulsan. Kim's eyes do not flicker. Everything, she repeats. A pause. Then a single nod. Above them, somewhere in the hotel's upper floors, muted voices drift through polished corridors where contracts wait to be signed. Aisha slides the tablet back into her bag. The Genesis idles in the private deck, balanced but not untouched. The yellow alert continues its steady pulse, unseen by anyone who does not know where to look. She reaches up and wipes the faint grease from her cheek with the back of her hand. It leaves a darker streak instead,